Calm in the storm. Peace is possible even when life shakes. There was once a village hidden between dark mountains and a restless sea. The people there believed the sea was alive, not because it moved, but because it watched. Every morning the fishermen would walk toward the shore before sunrise, carrying their nets over tired shoulders, while the cold wind whispered through the cliffs like distant voices. Children would stand near the harbor and wave goodbye, pretending not to notice the fear in their mother's eyes. Because everyone in that village knew one terrifying truth. The sea gave life, and sometimes it took it back. Among the fishermen was an old man named Josiah. His face carried the weight of storms most men could not survive. Deep scars crossed his hands like broken rivers, and his eyes held the strange silence of someone who had seen too much pain to speak about it anymore. But there was one thing about Josiah the villagers could never understand. Whenever storms came, he remained calm, not careless, not foolish, calm. While others panicked, he moved slowly. While others shouted, he whispered. While others trembled, he looked at the waves as if he knew something nobody else did. And the strange part was, the storms around him always seemed louder than the storms around everyone else. One evening, as the sky turned blood red above the ocean, a young fisherman named Daniel approached the old man near the docks. "Tell me something honestly," Daniel asked. Josiah kept repairing his fishing net without looking up. "What troubles your heart, son?" Daniel hesitated. Then quietly he said, "How can you stay peaceful when everything can disappear overnight?" The old man stopped weaving the net. For a moment, only the sound of crashing waves filled the silence between them. Then Josiah looked toward the horizon and whispered words Daniel would never forget. "Because I learned something the storm could not steal." Daniel frowned. "What do you mean?" The old fisherman smiled faintly. "And listen carefully, because this is where the story truly begins. Years before Daniel was born, Josiah had been known as the strongest fisherman in the village. He owned the largest boat, caught the most fish, and feared absolutely nothing. Or at least, that's what everyone believed. But here's the truth most people never saw. Josiah was terrified inside. Terrified of failure. Terrified of losing the people he loved. Terrified that one day life would take everything from him. So he worked harder. Longer. Relentlessly. Because sometimes people use success to hide fear. And one cold winter night, his greatest fear came true. A storm unlike anything the village had ever seen rose from the sea without warning. The wind screamed through the harbor. Roofs tore from houses. Waves crashed against the cliffs like giant fists. And somewhere beyond the darkness, Josiah's son was still trapped on the water. The villagers begged him not to go after him. "The sea is cursed tonight," they warned. "No man can survive out there." But love makes people do impossible things. So Josiah sailed directly into the storm, and what happened next became a story whispered through generations. The sea was violent beyond imagination. Rain struck like needles. Thunder cracked the sky apart. The boat rose and fell like a leaf in the mouth of a monster. Josiah screamed his son's name into the darkness again and again. But the storm swallowed every word. Hours passed. Maybe longer. Time disappears when fear takes control. And then, through the chaos, Josiah saw something impossible. Far in the distance, standing on a jagged rock surrounded by monstrous waves, was a man holding a lantern, completely still. completely calm. The wind should have thrown him into the sea. The waves should have destroyed him. But somehow, the storm could not touch him. Josiah stared in disbelief. Then the man lifted the lantern higher and shouted something across the roaring wind. "Why are you afraid?" Those words struck harder than thunder, not because they were loud, but because they were true. Why was he afraid? Because deep down he believed everything depended on him. His strength, his control, his ability to hold life together. And the terrifying truth was, he couldn't. None of us can. Listen, that realization changes a person. Because the greatest illusion humans carry is believing we can control every storm in life. But storms do not ask permission before arriving. One phone call can change your future. One betrayal can break your heart. One diagnosis can shake your entire world. One unexpected loss can leave you staring into emotional darkness, wondering if peace will ever return again. And maybe that's why this story matters today more than ever before. Because millions of people are smiling publicly while privately drowning, carrying anxiety like chains, fighting silent battles nobody sees, pretending to be strong while collapsing inside. And here's the heartbreaking part. Most people don't realize they are spiritually exhausted until life forces them to stop running. The lantern man called out again through the storm, "Come closer!" Josiah fought the waves with everything he had left. The closer he moved toward the rock, the calmer the sea became. Not completely calm, but calmer. And when he finally reached the rock, he saw something that shook him deeply. The man was smiling, not because the storm was small, but because his peace was greater than the storm. Josiah collapsed into the rock, shaking violently. "My son," he whispered. "I can't find my son." The lantern man knelt beside him, then quietly said something Josiah would carry for the rest of his life. Peace does not begin when storms end. Peace begins when fear loses its authority over your heart. And listen, that sentence changed everything. Because most people spend their entire lives waiting for perfect conditions before allowing themselves to feel peace. They think, when my finances improve, then I'll rest. When my pain disappears, then I'll be happy. When life becomes stable, then I'll trust God. But peace was never meant to depend on circumstances. Real peace exists even when life shakes. That night, Josiah and the lantern man searched the sea until dawn. And just before sunrise, they found the boy alive, clinging to broken wood near the cliffs. Weak, exhausted, but alive. The village called it a miracle. Josiah called it something else, a revelation. Because the real miracle was not surviving the storm. The real miracle was discovering calmness inside it. Years later, whenever storms came to the village, people would watch Josiah closely. And no matter how violent the sea became, he remained calm. Not because he believed storms were harmless, but because he had learned something fear could never understand. God's presence becomes most visible when human control disappears. And maybe that is exactly why you are hearing this story tonight. Because some of you are standing in storms right now. Storms of grief, storms of anxiety, storms of loneliness, storms of uncertainty. And listen to me carefully. You do not need to wait for the storm to end before finding peace. Because peace was never the absence of chaos. Peace is knowing you are not facing the chaos alone. And here's the strange part. Sometimes God allows storms not to destroy us, but to reveal what has been sleeping inside us all along. Faith, strength, surrender, trust, the very things comfort often hides. So if your heart feels tired tonight, if fear has been whispering that you will never survive this season, remember the lantern in the storm. Remember the man who stood calmly where others would drown. And remember this truth. The waves may shake the boat, but they cannot sink the soul that refuses to let go of hope. Because even in the darkest storm, light still exists. And maybe, just maybe, that light has been guiding you this entire time. The years passed quietly after that night. But the story of the lantern man never left Josiah's mind. Some villagers believed the mysterious stranger had been an angel. Others whispered he was simply a traveler who understood the sea better than ordinary men. But Josiah knew the truth was deeper than either explanation, because no ordinary man could stand untouched in a storm that terrified seasoned fishermen, and no ordinary voice could speak peace into a heart drowning in fear. From that night forward, Josiah changed. Before the storm, he had been a man obsessed with control. After the storm, he became a man obsessed with peace. Not temporary peace, not the kind purchased through comfort or wealth, but the kind that survives suffering, the kind that remains breathing even when life falls apart. And strangely enough, people began noticing it. A calmness followed him, not perfection, not endless happiness, calmness. When fishermen argued at the harbor, Josiah spoke softly. When storms delayed boats for days, he never panicked. When food became scarce during difficult winters, he still shared what little he had. And honestly, some people hated him for it, because peaceful people unintentionally expose the fear hidden inside others. One man in particular could not stand him. His name was Marcus. Young, strong, proud, Marcus believed peace was weakness. He often mocked Josiah openly in front of the village. "One day the sea will humble you again, old man," he sneered one afternoon. Josiah simply smiled. But here's the thing. Mockery often hides pain. And Marcus carried more pain than anyone realized. Years earlier, his father had abandoned the family after losing everything during a violent season of famine. Since then, Marcus trusted nobody. Not people, not hope, not even God, especially not God. He believed life was cruel, random, and merciless. So he built emotional walls around himself. Walls of anger, walls of pride, walls so thick that nobody could see the frightened child still hiding behind them. And maybe that sounds familiar, because many people do the exact same thing today. Some hide pain through arrogance, some through humor, some through success, some through endless distractions. But brokenness always finds a way to leak through eventually. Always. One evening, as dark clouds gathered once again over the sea, Marcus approached the harbor preparing his boat, despite warnings from older fishermen. "Don't go tonight," one shouted. "The water feels wrong." But Marcus laughed bitterly. "The sea doesn't scare me. Listen carefully. The most dangerous storms often arrive when people become overconfident. Within an hour of leaving shore, the sky transformed into chaos. The wind exploded across the ocean. Rain hammered the water so violently it looked as though the sea itself was boiling. Back in the village, fear spread quickly. Lanterns flickered inside homes as families prayed for loved ones trapped on the water. And standing near the docks was Josiah, silent, watching the storm carefully. Then suddenly, his face changed, because far beyond the crashing waves, he saw something horrifying. Marcus's boat breaking apart. Without hesitation, Josiah grabbed a lantern and untied his small fishing vessel. Several villagers rushed toward him instantly. "You can't go out there. You'll die." But the old man answered with words so calm they unsettled everyone listening. "Some storms are meant to reveal who we truly are." And then he sailed directly into the darkness. The sea was monstrous. Waves towered like moving mountains. The boat creaked violently beneath him as thunder shattered the heavens above. But Josiah's eyes never left the distant wreckage, and deep inside, a memory returned. The lantern man, the storm, the question, "Why are you afraid?" Josiah realized something profound in that moment. Fear had once controlled his entire life. Now it no longer owned him. Not because he became fearless, but because he had discovered something greater than fear: trust. And there is a difference. Fearless people believe nothing can hurt them. Faithful people know pain may come, but they are not alone inside it. The storm intensified. Rain blinded him. The waves slammed against the boat with terrifying force. And then, through the darkness, Josiah heard screaming. Marcus, clinging desperately to broken wood as the sea pulled him farther from shore. "Deus, help me!" Panic consumed the young fisherman completely. His strength was gone. His pride was gone. His arrogance had vanished beneath the waves. And for the first time in years, Marcus was honest. "I don't want to die." Josiah reached toward him through the storm. But another massive wave crashed between them, nearly flipping the boat entirely. For one terrifying second, both men thought it was over. And listen, this next moment matters more than you realize. Because sometimes God waits until human strength completely fails before revealing where true strength comes from. Josiah steadied himself against the raging sea and shouted something Marcus would remember forever. "Look at me!" Marcus lifted his terrified eyes. And there, in the middle of chaos, he saw something impossible. Peace. Not around Josiah. Inside him. "How are you calm?" Marcus screamed. The old fisherman's answer was almost swallowed by thunder. "Because storms don't get the final word." Those words pierced Marcus deeper than the freezing rain. All his life he had believed suffering was proof of abandonment. Proof that nobody cared. Proof that life was meaningless. But now, watching an old man risk his life to save someone who mocked him, Marcus encountered something he could not explain. Grace. And grace has a terrifying power. It destroys the lies we build our identity around. Josiah pulled Marcus into the boat moments before another enormous wave swallowed the wreckage completely. The young fisherman collapsed, shaking uncontrollably. Not from cold, from realization. Because near death strips away illusions faster than anything else on earth. Money becomes meaningless. Pride becomes meaningless. Reputation becomes meaningless. And suddenly the soul asks questions it spent years trying to avoid. What truly matters? What remains when everything else disappears? Who am I beneath the masks? The storm continued raging as they fought their way back towards shore. But something had shifted inside Marcus. He no longer stared at the waves. He stared at Josiah, at the strange peace living inside him. at the calmness that made no logical sense, and finally, quietly, almost ashamed to ask, Marcus whispered, "Where did you learn this peace?" For a long moment, Josiah said nothing. Then softly he answered, "In the middle of losing everything." The young fisherman frowned. Josiah continued staring through the storm as he spoke. "I spent years believing peace came from controlling life. Then life broke apart anyway. And when I had nothing left, I discovered God had never left me." Marcus fell silent, because deep down he had spent his entire life angry at God for storms he never understood. And maybe someone listening right now has done the same. Maybe pain convinced you heaven stopped caring. Maybe disappointment hardened your heart. Maybe unanswered prayers slowly turned into bitterness. But listen carefully. Some of the deepest encounters with God happen in seasons we initially thought were destroying us. Because comfort rarely changes people. Storms do. The village finally appeared through the rain near dawn. Lanterns glowed along the shoreline as villagers rushed toward the harbor in disbelief. Nobody expected either man to survive. But as Marcus stepped onto the dock, something inside him had changed forever. Not perfectly. Transformation never happens instantly. But the walls around his heart had cracked open. And sometimes, that is where healing begins. Not in certainty, not in control, but in surrender. That night, Marcus could not sleep. The storm outside had ended, but another storm had awakened inside him. Questions, conviction, memories he buried years ago. And near sunrise, unable to escape his thoughts any longer, he walked toward Josiah's small house near the cliffs. The old fisherman was already awake, sitting outside, watching the sunrise spread gold across the ocean. Marcus approached slowly, then quietly asked the question that changes every human life eventually. "How do I find peace like yours?" Josiah smiled gently, then pointed toward the sea. "The ocean still has storms," he said. "The difference is, I no longer worship them." Marcus looked confused, and Josiah continued. "Most people spend their lives staring at fear until fear becomes their god. They obey anxiety. They obey anger. They obey despair. But peace begins when you finally decide fear will no longer sit on the throne of your heart." The young fisherman stood speechless, because for the first time, he understood. Peace was not weakness. Peace was freedom. And far out across the glowing water, as sunlight pierced through the remaining storm clouds, Marcus noticed something strange. A distant figure standing near the rocks by the shore. Still, silent, holding what looked like a lantern. And then, just as suddenly, the figure disappeared. Marcus ran toward the shoreline instantly. His boots slammed against the wet sand as the cold morning wind tore through the harbor. He searched the rocks wildly, scanning every shadow, every crashing wave, every corner where the mysterious figure could have gone. But there was nobody there. Only the sea, endless, restless, breathing like some ancient living thing beneath the pale sunrise. Marcus turned back toward Josiah, breathing heavily. "Did you see him?" The old fisherman remained seated quietly outside his home. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then softly, "Yes." Marcus waited desperately for an explanation. But Josiah simply stared at the horizon with distant eyes. "And listen," Sometimes the greatest spiritual truths cannot be explained immediately. They must be experienced. The young fisherman sat beside him in silence as sunlight slowly spread across the water. Then Josiah finally spoke. "When I was your age," he said quietly, "I thought strength meant surviving storms alone." He smiled faintly. "But loneliness is not strength." The wind moved gently through the cliffs. "And pride," he continued, "is often fear wearing armor." Those words struck Marcus deeply, because they were true. All his anger, all his arrogance, all his mocking laughter had been armor, a desperate attempt to hide the terrified person inside him. And maybe somebody listening right now understands exactly what that feels like. Because many people become loud when they are hurting, cold when they are wounded, defensive when they are afraid, not because they are evil, but because broken hearts often protect themselves in unhealthy ways. Marcus stared at the ocean quietly, then asked the question lingering in his soul all night. Why would God care about someone like me? Josiah looked at him carefully, and his answer came almost like a whisper. Because storms do not change your value. The young fisherman felt tears burn behind his eyes instantly. Not because the sentence sounded dramatic, but because part of him had believed the opposite his entire life. That pain made him unwanted. That failure made him unworthy. That weakness made him forgettable. And listen carefully here. One of the cruelest lies fear ever tells people is this: you are loved only when you are strong. But grace says something entirely different. Grace says, you are loved even when you are drowning. That realization shattered something inside Marcus. For years, he had hidden every vulnerable part of himself behind pride because he believed weakness would make people abandon him. But sitting beside the old fisherman now, for the first time, he felt seen, not judged. Seen. And there is healing power in that kind of love. Days passed after the storm, then weeks. Slowly, the village returned to normal. Fishermen repaired broken boats. Families rebuilt damaged homes. Children laughed near the harbor once more. But Marcus was no longer the same man. Something invisible had changed inside him. He began helping others quietly. He stopped arguing at the docks, stopped mocking people, stopped carrying himself like he had something to prove. And strangely enough, the more peace entered his life, the more uncomfortable certain people became around him. Because transformation threatens people who are committed to remaining unchanged. One evening, a group of fishermen confronted Marcus near the marketplace. "What happened to you?" one laughed. "You used to be fearless." Marcus almost answered immediately. Then he paused. Because now he understood something important. Fearlessness and peace are not the same thing. So instead, he quietly replied, "No, I used to be angry." The men laughed mockingly and walked away. But Marcus felt no need to defend himself. And honestly, that may have been the clearest sign of transformation yet. Because healed people stop needing constant validation from wounded people. Listen, one of the most powerful things peace does is silence the desperate need to prove yourself to everyone. Weeks later, another storm season approached. Dark clouds began gathering more frequently above the sea. Villagers prepared carefully. Food was stored. Boats secured tightly. Lanterns hung outside homes in case darkness swallowed the harbor unexpectedly again. And then, the rumors began. Whispers spread throughout the village about ships disappearing beyond the cliffs, entire crews vanishing overnight. No wreckage, no bodies, nothing. Some blamed pirates. Others blamed cursed waters. Fear slowly infected the village once more, because uncertainty feeds anxiety faster than almost anything else. And here's the strange part about fear. It spreads. One frightened voice becomes many. One rumor becomes panic. One dark thought becomes an emotional prison. Soon nobody wanted to sail beyond the cliffs anymore. Not even experienced fishermen. But one night, a desperate mother arrived at Josiah's home in tears. Her son had sailed earlier that morning before the rumors intensified. He never returned. The villagers refused to search for him. "It's too dangerous," they insisted. But Josiah stood immediately. So did Marcus. And as they prepared the boat under the pale moonlight, the terrified woman grabbed Josiah's hands and whispered, "What if the stories are true?" The old fisherman looked toward the black ocean quietly, then answered, "Fear grows strongest where truth is absent." And with that, they sailed into the darkness. The sea felt wrong that night. Too quiet. No wind. No birds. No sound except water brushing gently against wood. Marcus gripped the lantern tightly as the boat drifted farther from shore. Something about the silence disturbed him more than any storm ever had, because sometimes silence can feel heavier than chaos. Hours passed, nothing. Then suddenly, Marcus noticed movement in the fog ahead. A massive shadow, too large to be another fishing boat. His heart began pounding violently. "Josiah," he whispered. The old fisherman stared ahead carefully, and slowly, out of the mist, a wrecked ship appeared, broken, rotting, half-submerged. Its massive wooden frame creaked softly against the water like bones shifting in darkness. Marcus felt cold fear crawl up his spine. There were no lanterns aboard, no voices, no signs of life. Yet somehow, the ship did not feel empty. Listen carefully, because this next moment changes everything. As their boat drifted closer, Marcus noticed something hanging from the shattered mast. Lanterns, dozens of them, extinguished, swaying gently in the fog, and beneath them, words carved deeply into the wood. "Only the lost fear the night." Marcus stared at the message in horror. "What does that mean?" But before Josiah could answer, a sound echoed across the dead ship. Footsteps, slow, heavy, somewhere inside the darkness. Marcus gripped the lantern harder. Every instinct screamed at him to flee. Then, a figure emerged from the fog, tall, wrapped in dark clothing, its face hidden beneath shadows. And in one hand, it carried a lantern glowing softly with golden light. Marcus froze completely, because somehow, deep down, he recognized the figure. The same stillness, the same impossible calm, the same presence that seemed untouched by fear itself. The lantern figure stopped near the edge of the ruined ship, then slowly spoke. "People spend their entire lives running from darkness," the voice said. "But darkness is often where truth becomes visible." Marcus could barely breathe. Josiah lowered his head respectfully. And suddenly Marcus realized something shocking. The old fisherman was not afraid, not even slightly. The lantern figure raised the glowing light higher. And in that moment, Marcus saw something hidden beneath the broken ship. Dozens of smaller boats, destroyed by storms over many years, entire lives buried beneath the sea. The figure spoke again. Every storm leaves behind two things. The golden light reflected across the water like liquid fire. Fear or faith. Marcus felt those words hit his soul like thunder, because suddenly he understood. Storms do not automatically destroy people. They reveal them. Some emerge bitter, some emerge stronger, some lose hope completely, and some find God in ways comfort never could have revealed. The lantern figure looked directly at Marcus now and softly asked, "What are you becoming through your storm?" The question pierced him deeply, because for the first time, he realized suffering had been shaping him his entire life. The real question was whether it would harden his heart or transform it. And maybe that question matters for every person listening right now. What are your storms creating inside you? Bitterness, anger, hopelessness, or deeper faith? Because pain always plants seeds. The only question is which seeds we allow to grow. The fog thickened around the wrecked ship. Then suddenly, the lantern light flickered violently. The mysterious figure stepped backwards slowly into the darkness. And before disappearing completely, one final sentence echoed across the sea. Peace is not found by escaping storms, but by discovering who walks through them with you. Then the light vanished. Gone. Only darkness remained. Marcus stood trembling in silence. Not from fear this time, from awakening. The sea eventually became calm again. Not perfectly still, just peaceful enough for the journey home. Marcus sat quietly at the front of the boat as dawn slowly rose across the horizon, painting the dark waters with gold. For the first time in his life, he was not afraid of the storm anymore, because now he understood something most people spend their entire lives searching for. Peace was never hidden inside comfort. It was hidden inside surrender. The village slowly came into view through the morning mist, and as the harbor lanterns faded beneath the rising sun, Marcus looked back one final time toward the endless ocean. The storms were still there, the waves still dangerous, life still uncertain. But somehow, his heart had changed. And listen carefully before the story ends. Maybe your life feels like a storm right now. Maybe you are carrying silent pain nobody else sees. Maybe you smile during the day while fighting battles alone at night. Maybe fear has exhausted your soul for so long that peace feels impossible now. But hear this truth clearly. You are not abandoned. You are not forgotten. And your storm is not the end of your story. Because sometimes God calms the storm around us, and sometimes He calms the storm within us. And honestly, the second miracle may be even greater. The old fisherman once said something Marcus would carry forever. The waves may rise, but fear does not have to rise with them. And maybe tonight, that message was meant for you. Maybe this story found you for a reason. Because even in your darkest season, even when life feels heavy, even when answers seem distant, there is still light somewhere in the storm. There is still hope. There is still peace waiting for you. And there is still a God who walks across raging waters toward frightened hearts. So don't give up. Not yet. Your story is still being written. And one day, you may look back at the storm that almost broke you and realize it was the very thing that led you closer to God than ever before. If this story touched your heart, then please take a moment right now to support our channel, Parables of Hope. Your like, your comment, and your subscription truly help us continue creating these meaningful stories that inspire faith, healing, and hope across the world. And listen, when you subscribe, you are not just supporting a channel. You are helping spread light to people silently fighting storms every single day. So subscribe to Parables of Hope, turn on the notification bell, and continue this journey with us. And if you know someone struggling through fear, anxiety, heartbreak, or hopelessness, share this story with them, because one message of hope can change a life forever. Until next time, may peace guard your heart. May faith rise stronger than fear, and may you always remember, even in the middle of the storm, you are never alone.